I mean, in this scenario, we're
Well,
talking
we
about kids that have
gotta go
already
back
been.
to Freud here because there are obvious developmental consequences of, having a father and a mother. They both
Okay,
play
first of all, you
distinct roles.
referencing Freud is not helping at all. Okay, second of all, no, there might be consequences of certain upbringing in certain environments,
I
of
don't
course.
understand. I
However,
don't
hold on, wait,
understand this
yo, bro,
against
bro,
Freud.
hey.
Hello, hello. Yeah. So first of all, I'm just saying, I'm not here to actually, I'm not here actually because I am anti-gay or like I believe whoever wants to like, whoever we love or whatever you love should be entirely free and personal thing. But because I'm too bored and I want to play devil's advocate, so I've been tracking like anti-gay arguments here and there for a while, and I just want to like shoot a few, so see how would you respond to them.
Mhm.
Okay, so of course, the first is natural argument, which I do not really buy. I don't really buy natural law itself, but there is a natural argument that, well, sexuality, just like everything in nature, like in other animals or stuff and stuff, there's a teleology, right? Especially if you're a Christian, you believe in teleology. You say it's both like creating a union with another member of your group, like human beings in general, and also to reproduce. And of course, I know you used to be like sort of like Christian, but in some sense, but then you are no longer like, I don't know if you still consider yourself religious or something, but
Would
if
it be,
someone,
do you think it would be against that Christian if two people got married if they couldn't have kids? If they were like a straight couple getting married, but they couldn't have
yeah,
kids?
I just generally want to hear how would you respond to the teleology argument,
I would
especially because
have
I
to
go to
say,
church a
I
lot.
would, well, first I would say who makes that category? I mean, I know it comes from God. They believe God sets certain, like, there's certain purpose for certain body parts, I guess. Um, but I would just say, like, how do you know that? Where's your evidence of this, first and foremost? If they say it's the Bible, then I would ask, well, how come gay people, when they are able to partake in loving consensual relationships, do a net positive for society when it comes to adopting kids and whatnot? Why would God be against that then? It just doesn't seem like it makes sense. Why is God's prescription one that leads to a net harm for orphaned kids? Like, it just doesn't make any fucking sense.
I actually posed this argument toward our supporters of the teleology of sex, and what they would respond to me at that time was that um, having teleology of sex, which is to reproduce, it's not mutually exclusive from like adopting children. And they would make example that, yeah, of course you can adopt children. It's a very good thing to do. It's a very Christian thing to do. But on the other hand, doesn't mean it will negate that reproduction should be the only goal of sexuality.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't think it should be, but that would be their argument.
Yeah, that would be their argument. And personally, I found when you are appealing to like a non-positive, by non-positive I mean like supernatural, like non-confirmable,
Hmm.
like in the human way, non-confirmable and scientific and historical source of legitimacy, it will be essentially impossible to defeat a argument, an anti-gay so-called argument based on teleology of sex. And personally,
You're
I
saying it would
found
be
it's kind of,
impossible to defeat an anti-gay argument?
I mean, I feel like if their argument is all from like a supernatural source, it's essentially impossible to really defeat those arguments
Yeah, but
unless
it
you
doesn't need to
defeat
be
from.
defeated for you to still cast enough doubt. So, for example, I can't disprove or prove a God. So, therefore, why should I blindly believe that this random person is actually hearing from God and is able to accurately tell me what God wants? So, I don't need to debunk it. I don't need to like disprove it. There's too
Mhm.
much ambiguity there for it to have any validity anyway.
So you essentially you are saying the teleology argument is kind of like meaningless in the discussion of a social issue because it's not provable, it's not debunkable, it's just there, and there's no more reason or legitimacy for you to believe in its source of a supernatural God versus you do not believe in the supernatural
Well,
God?
like what I already said, if I'm going to believe in a supernatural God, the Christian God that's benevolent and wants nothing but good for everybody, then why is God's prescription one that leads to a negative outcome for kids in the foster care system? When gay people are accepted, they're accepting and, adopting kids at higher rates. They're doing a net good. So why is God, the supernatural, benevolent, all-knowing entity, advocating for something that leads to a net harm? It seems like a contradiction again.
Interesting. Sort of like the problem of evil argument. I think that would be one of the best response to this argument. Actually,
Yeah.
of course, the other argument will be like the so-called like non-God argument, non-religious argument, which is basically saying homosexuality like as a social norm exists because there's like a popular will, a general belief for that, and essentially a general belief, if enough people follow it, makes a right in itself. How would you
No,
respond to this kind of argument?
that would just be an ad populum fallacy. That would literally just be because a large amount of people believe something, it's true. I mean, there are times in which like 90% of the country believed in God. It didn't make God real.
Yes, but here's the problem. If you say popular will itself does not justify right or wrong, especially in a social or cultural issue, then what higher authority do we have than the popular will?
What higher authority do we have than what?
Than like popular will, like than the general belief of something. Because if we pretend that God does not exist, like hypothetically, if God just does not exist, all human issues are up to human to decide. Then the overwhelming majority of humans decide that we should will one social problem, one question in this particular way. And if you argue that this popularity of this will does not make it in itself right, then what kind of authority we need to draw to defeat, to inhibit the popular will?
Right. Well, that's why I think that it's really important that we all have like a foundational base moral understanding. So you don't need God for this. I, for one, just want to maximize human well-being, reduce human suffering, reduce sickness, things like this. Very basic concepts to kind of start with. And so because I want to maximize human well-being, well, to restrict a bunch of gay people from living their lives freely when they're not harming anybody, that's harming people. That contradicts my moral values. So therefore, I would not be advocating for that. A lot of people already have like an internal moral compass that they've sort of established one way or another. People try to say it's from religion, but at the end of the day, it's not, because people still determine what is and isn't right, even if God has never spoken on it. So I think that it comes from like it having a foundational moral understanding. And then when you all kind of have an agreement there, then you're able to move forward. And we already kind of do have that agreement. I mean, most people you ask, obviously they want to maximize human well-being, reduce human suffering.
Yes. So would you say that you are sort of you still believe there is a objective morality, like an objective good, although you do not necessarily think this objective good come from a divine or supernatural being?
No, because I don't think that an objective good could exist without a divine. There would need to be something, right? Because objective by definition is something that exists without human perception. So if we're talking about something like morals, morality requires human perception. So I don't see how that could ever be objective.
So correct me if I'm wrong here, but you say you do not believe in there's a objective morality or objective good in any sense. But on the other hand,
no, I don't. But I also don't think you need to, because a lot of people hear that and then instantly they're like, "Oh, so now you're okay with murdering and what everything else?" No, of course not. I don't need to have an objective moral good and moral wrong to still think that something is right and wrong based on the outcomes of that action.
Okay, so again, even though morality itself is not objective, you still think there is a better moral code.
Yes, like is it a universal subjective or some term like this, where it's like a broad understanding, a subjective understanding but it's more universally understood.
Like
It's sort of like objective.
categorical imperative or something like that. Like you should not,
Maybe,
you
I
should
don't
only
know.
treat others the way you want to be treated. Something.
Sort of like that, yeah. But I'm not really sure. But yeah, I don't think you need to believe in like objective morality to believe that something is right and wrong. Like for example, if I go and kill an innocent person, that's wrong because I'm harming somebody who was otherwise doing nothing, no harm to me. They had no reason, like I had no reason to do that thing. That's only going to do a net harm to that person, to me, and then to my whole life. So yeah, I don't think you need to have an objective morality.
Okay, I see. It's a very nice rationalist argument. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's practically the most two challenging arguments, anti-gay, anti-homosexuality argument I think I've faced so far. So yeah, that's basically what I would like to discuss today. But again, I want to thank you for like, making these interviews happen and try to debunk some beliefs.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, and have a good rest of
You
your
too.
night. Greetings.
Hi. I used to watch a ton of your videos. I have a ton of respect for the content you make.
Thank you.
The reason why, and I'm not saying being gay is bad, but the argument against it here is the natural law. You see that sex was meant to be a procreative act, and being gay, I can't condemn or speak against gay people, but it violates the natural law and the natural purpose of life.
Well, there's a lot of things that take place in nature, right, that don't really have any weight on morality. So like within nature, we see things like rape take place. We would never say that that's morally okay. And the same could be said for
Hunter. That's a straw man.
no,
and
it's
you
not.
know that. Yes,
You're talking about natural law. You're talking about the natural order of things. Wouldn't you need to look at nature?
I said natural law forbids homosexuality, and now you're saying that I'm somehow condoning.
How do you distinguish
unequivocally untrue and totally fallacious?
How do you distinguish natural law from what is natural?
Natural law is bound to human beings. What happens in nature happens between animals, and you have to make a distinction between things that happen in nature between animals and things that happen between humans who have a moral obligation.
But there's a lot of things humans do that go outside of natural
moral
law.
Compass that tells us that there are certain things that we are required to do and certain things that we should not do. And one of the things that is required of us is to have families and spread the species.
This is not required, and I don't know who is requiring this thing. You're saying that you would prefer it to be this way, which is fine. Some people can prefer it to be that way all they want.
Also, it's natural facts.
Hold on. What's also a natural fact is that sex is not only used for reproduction, and this is why we see homosexual behavior in nature. And we see the homosexual behavior in nature for various different...
Not used and should and should not be used are two different... it's a distinct conversation.
You're talking about natural law. I'm giving you an example of nature. In nature, homosexuality is... If
homicide happens, it's natural. It's okay. It should be acceptable.
Homosexual
it goes
behavior
against
takes
the purpose
place...
of life and the continuation of the human race.
My friend, yeah, because sex is not all just about reproduction. Heterosexual sex oftentimes is, but sex is oftentimes also about strengthening bonds and whatnot. This is, again, why I keep on bringing up the fact that homosexual behavior is seen in nature for reasons outside of reproduction. It strengthens bonds with the packs, for example.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you there. It is absolutely a unitive act as well.
So then why are you saying it violates natural law if it's in nature?
It's natural law. Because we both know that it's a unitive and procreative act that are in before like 1899 condoms didn't exist. There was no way to separate the unitive act from the procreative act.
Well, now there is.
Now there is, but morality is not subjective.
Why is it morality? Why are you deciding that it's morality? Why are you basing morality on morals or on natural law?
It is good and worth doing to have families.
Okay, well, gay people adopt at higher rates than straight couples.
Okay, well, with that said, we have to look at what's the best family structure for the kids.
Well, if we have kids in the foster care system or being raised in a loving environment, I'm going to choose them being raised in a loving environment. I mean, in this scenario, we're
Well,
talking
we
about kids that have
got to go
already
back
been.
to Freud here because there are obvious developmental consequences of, having a father and a mother. They both
Okay,
play
first of all,
distinct
you
roles.
referencing Freud is not helping at all. Okay, second of all, no, there might be consequences of certain upbringing in certain
I
environments, of
don't
course.
understand. I don't
However, hold on,
understand
wait,
this
yo, bro,
against
bro.
Freud.
Hey, when it
Let me
comes
just say
to,
that for the
hey,
record.
kids raised by gay couples do just as well as kids raised by straight couples. So there is no negative outcome on those kids. So if you're saying it's natural law to have a family,
Source.
well,
What's your
gay
source?
couples adopt at higher rates and have families.
You need two parents, not a father and a mother.
Two
Well, that's
two
true.
parents is good to have. You can have two fathers, two mothers, a father or a mother. Two parents in a stable environment is the best environment for a child to be raised in. It doesn't matter if it's two men, two women, or a man and a woman, as long as they're married and
Whoa.
in a stable environment.
That's a big assertion with no evidence or source to
I
back
just
that
gave
up.
you the okay. They have done longitudinal studies over
Who?
decades and decades and
Who's
decades.
they?
Do you want me to pull up the studies like right here? I can if you
Yeah,
want, but like,
go ahead.
okay.
I think you're blowing smoke up my ass here.
Okay. All
What
right.
happened to you, man? I remember your videos years ago.
I got based.
Days?
Yeah, you're over here saying natural law this, natural law that, even though there's all kinds of things that happen in nature that are not moral, even though we do things that violate natural law all the time.
You don't know what
Where's
natural
humans driving a car in natural law?
clearly you don't understand what natural law is.
Clearly you don't.
No, I do know exactly what it is. You're applying that to something that it is not. Absolutely.
Well, then you need to distinguish natural law versus what is and is not natural.
That's exactly what I mean. Natural law, it applies to humans. We're
Strictly
born
humans.
with it. An
Okay.
understanding of good
I
and
guess I just
evil.
don't understand. So it's natural law that what humans look to nature to determine our morals?
Why don't you Google that while you're looking up those studies?
No, I'm looking up the other ones for you first. All right. We identified 79 scholarly studies that met our criteria for adding to knowledge about the well-being of children with gay or lesbian parents. Of those studies, 75 concluded that children of gay or lesbian parents fare no worse than other children. Taken together, this research forms an overwhelming scholarly consensus based on over 3 decades of peer-reviewed research that having a gay or lesbian parent does not harm children. This comes from whatweknow.cornell.edu.
I think KJ wants to join.
Okay. I feel like, I don't know, man. It sounds like you don't really have much else to say.
Well, it's natural law. I mean, it's a simple fact.
Okay. Have you ever thought
It's
that maybe
something.
like you're being a little bit retarded and that's a violation of natural law?
Whoa,
Like
that's an
that is
ugly
definitely
word,
a
my
possibility,
friend.
right? I mean, just
That
something to consider,
is an ugly word.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly. Almost as
Yeah,
mean
it
as
is.
homophobia. I know.
I'm
All right, now how do
not
I make you
homophobic.
leave?
Like I said, I'm not against gay people. I'm saying it
You are against gay
presupposes.
people. You're
No, I'm
denying
not.
that gay people do a benefit when they adopt children. You're saying that that's just not true. You didn't even believe me when I told you
The
that. You're saying
research
it
isn't out
violates
there. These
natural law, even
studies
though
are
we've
created
acknowledged
under
that sex
pressure
exists
of a
for other things
mainstream
besides just
establishment.
procreation. You have nothing.
These studies are funded by people who
Yep.
have a
Mm-hmm.
vested interest in proclaiming a
Uh-huh.
mainstream narrative.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
not
George Soros.
even saying
George Soros did it.
not George Soros.
Crap,
All right.
crap, crap. Give me
All right.
one
How do I
second.
get this guy out of here now?
Like this.
Hey man, how you doing? I've spoken to you before, like a while ago, like I think
Huh?
probably like a year or two ago. I just wanted to talk about. Hold on, I gotta turn off my camera real quick. Low battery, I
Okay.
just noticed. So I mainly wanted to ask you. It's not really like I don't believe that being gay is wrong. I think myself as being quite progressive.
Okay.
I would say, do you think that there is a I would say that the perception of gay people in terms of like part of the way in which people perceive them, like for example, I come from a very conservative area.
Mhm.
A lot of people seem to think that gay people are pretty obnoxious because of the way they're represented in media. Do you think that is a valid claim? Do you feel that it's something that's tangible, or do you feel that's just something that is not correlating with reality in terms of how gay people, queer people in general, are represented?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's really fully representative at all. I mean, I think that a lot of those same people would be shocked if they found out that I think it's like 72% of LGBT community members also attend church every Sunday. I think that a lot of people probably would be surprised to hear things like this. Um, but yeah, that's part of the issue, but also kind of speaks to the problem, I think, because right now what we have is a lack of representation when it comes to how minorities are represented in media. So the type of representation that we're seeing right now overwhelmingly is of gay people at pride parades being really obnoxious. And that unfortunately makes people think that that's how gay people all are, which is obviously very silly and very ignorant, but that's what people start thinking. So if anything, I think that just speaks to how important good representation is for minority groups. Um, and why Republicans should stop whining about everything being woke anytime they have like a gay person in a movie or something, right? Because the representation is for them. They're the ones that need it.
Yeah, and I agree with you in terms of that. It's just that this is at least my perception of it, which I may have to rethink.
Mhm.
Is that I see a lot, especially like in the news. I'm not a really news person, but whenever I catch like my grandparents or like any family member watching the news,
Mhm.
and it's relating to anything about like gay people, it's always not really like I would say proper representation, like showing people more than just like pride parades, etc. And when it comes to media, a lot of people, I would say that they're very what's the word for it, um I don't have like the term for it, just very like um discourse pilled. I don't know how to say it. It's just everything is
Mhm.
either woke or anti-woke, which I feel just is very reductive. And at least my perception has been that people just kind of like just do that with media in general. So but I honestly don't know what would be a good solution to that. I just wanted to know like what were your views on that. um
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think just like I said, more positive representation. I don't really fully know like what to do exactly. I know that in the past, gay people were more accepted and more normalized by positive media representation. This has actually already been documented. I think it was back in the 60s. So this is already something that I know is possible. I think that if we just keep kind of advocating for that and keep on, arguing against bad beliefs and whatnot, that's kind of the best we can do.
and do you think that this is my opinion, of course, I might be wrong, is that a lot of people that are of conservative backgrounds or that are not from, I would say, like more open-minded areas, utilizing like TikTok and everything, being able to see a lot of gay people online, being comfortable and stuff like that, and also being in media. A lot of people kind of get this sort of like whiplash in terms of what they thought was like reality.
Mhm.
Like I've seen a lot on TikTok about people being like, oh, this country is just turning woke in just fucking couple of years. And no, I think it's just more people are more open to those things. Do you think that there is a way to change somebody's mind on that? That it's my view is that most people, like I guess the U.S. being like pretty liberal has always been that way. It's just online people are more comfortable showing their identities,
Mhm.
and people not being accepting of that. That's where the whole woke thing comes about. Just kind of this cognitive dissonance, that gay people are not everywhere, but they're everywhere at the same time. They control everything, but they're weak at the same time
Mhm.
socially. Do you think there's some good arguments to try to steer somebody away from that sort of belief?
L- like, well, I mean, I know a good one that worked for me before is pointing out how that's actually a fascistic tendency is to believe that the enemy is both weak and strong at the same time. So kind of always remains undefined. We actually see this happen a lot, like what you just said, where it's like gay people are pathetic SJW snowflakes, but they're also super smart and controlling the schools and grooming all of our kids. So it's like the enemy is both strong and weak. I think that sometimes pointing out how that's like a fascistic tendency, that's a really common one, can sometimes wake people up too, to be like, okay, I'm obviously falling for some bad ideas here.
Yeah, because I've had this conversation before with friends and people online, and I feel that the most difficult part is trying to steer the conversation away that in terms like the discourse in general, that everything is woke, therefore that whatever is has like you probably saw that. I'm not sure if you covered it on your channel. It's been a while since I've been to it.
Mhm.
But the whole like Sweet Baby Inc. Discord and how discourse and everybody just saying that, oh, it's this woke company, all these games are woke, don't support these corporations and all that. And I noticed that the sort of paradigm of like discourse was more upon like the left side,
Mhm.
but there's still a lot of people that buy into that sort of idea that everything's just being transformed gay and all that. And they see these sort of like very odd examples of
Mhm.
companies that are pro LGBTQ representation and more open to this sort of aiding companies to be more taking more into account like
Mhm.
minorities and everything.
Yeah.
How do you combat that sort of thinking that because of this one example, it doesn't correlate to other things in general, like like a whole web of like conspiracy and stuff like that? How do you how can you move people away from that form of thinking? Because I personally just don't have I don't have like a good way of doing it. Like in my head, I just don't have the arguments.
Well, if the argument is that like they're gonna turn people gay, that's a pretty easy one to just start with, where you just basically force them to admit that they think somebody can choose to be gay. And then that starts to break it down pretty quick. And then when they start to understand that someone is gay as a result of really no conscious choice that they make, suddenly it makes a lot more sense to be more welcoming and accepting towards this thing, because it's not a choice. It's not encouraging somebody to choose being gay. It's encouraging somebody that if they are gay, not to be ashamed of it.
All right. And one thing that before I go, so I can allow other people to have the chance to speak to, I wanted to ask in terms of like the overall like social view, because here's like an interesting thing is that I started getting into like online politics thanks to your own content,
Mhm.
and that was back probably like 2017, and when it comes to like online people that get it, like do you that get into online politics and they have like a certain viewpoint, like for example they start out more like right leaning, do you feel that as time goes on more people will do as like you and I would say that move more to the left, or do you think that has to be a more of an active measure for people to like take on their own, or do you think people move on that naturally? Like for example, if I think gay people are bad, do you think those people, as time goes on, they would move away from that idea or that viewpoint?
Well, I'm not sure. I think it's going to ultimately come down to how smart that person already is, as funny as that sounds, because the more educated somebody becomes, the more liberal they become. So odds are, if they're going to change, it's going to be a result of more education.
All right, and just just before I go, and what are some ways that you think this can be achieved in like a realistic way, in like let's say like the next decade, like in a much more like broader scale, besides of course internet discourse? I would mean like outside of it.
Well, I think internet discourse is where it starts. I mean, we already see like people on Twitter, for example, like congressmen or whatever, that they'll be literally like tweeting or passing policy that is about current culture war nonsense that's talked about on Twitter. So I think that a lot of the online conversation actually does shape the overall outcome a lot of the times.
Well, all right. Thank you so much, man, for giving me some of your time. I just wanted to clarify some ideas that I had about some of your viewpoints and everything. Maybe
Yeah, sure.
clarify some of maybe what's the word for it? Polish some of my way of thinking.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the time,
Yeah.
man.
No
Have a good
problem.
one. I
Thanks so
hope
much.